Recovery podcast is real life stories from everyday people in recovery. From mental health issues, trauma, substance misuse, and behavioural addictions. Please visit the website www.lifeinrecovery.co.uk for links to social media and a range of books written by your podcast host, Ren Coy.
Hello and welcome to the Life in Recovery podcast, episode 72 with me, Ren Coy. Hope you're doing well. A bit of good news with the vaccine, so hopefully come early spring next year, things will be a little bit more back to normal, which is good news for me especially because that means that hopefully this year my wedding will go ahead, as it was cancelled this year. Due to the pandemic, and also for family holidays as well, so hopefully we'll get to go on holiday again next year, but we'll see how things go. I'm remaining optimistic, and I hope you are too. The Life in Recovery podcast is sponsored by Dennis Berry Life Coaching. So Dennis is a certified life coach who's been working with people all over the world for over 15 years, and he can work with anybody anywhere via Zoom. He's an expert in addiction recovery and life mastery, and he's been clean and sober himself since 2003. And he can help you with your journey through sobriety and help you to achieve inner peace, success, and fulfill your life mission, whatever that may be. If you're sick and tired of being sick and tired and you're ready to make changes in your life, book your first free consultation by visiting www.dennisberry.com and use the code words Life in Recovery to get 10% off your next 3 sessions. The podcast is also sponsored by a former podcast guest and founder of sugaraddiction.com, Michael Collins. That was episode 20. He's helped thousands of addicts get and stay sober since 1985. During that time, his special passion has been to help recovering addicts who've turned to sugar after they got sober. Many recovering addicts struggle with weight gain, diabetes, and other health issues that all trace back to an addictive use of sugar. In most cases, quitting sugar is even harder than quitting drugs and alcohol. If you think you might need some help with your sugar addiction, Michael is offering a free copy of his book, The Last Resort Sugar Detox Guide, to all my listeners. I'm about a quarter into it, and it's seriously making me think about my use of sugar and how I'm going to quit. Just visit www.sugaraddiction.com/lifeinrecovery and download your free copy. And if you're really serious, check out his 30-day Sugar Freedom Challenge whilst you are there. The podcast is also sponsored by the Recovery Coach Training Academy from Helios Recovery. And this is for anyone who's interested in becoming a recovery coach. So recovery coaching is a form of strength-based, healing-centered support for persons in or seeking recovery from substance or behavioural addictions. Similar to life and business coaching, recovery coaching is a type of partnership where the person in or seeking recovery self-directs their recovery, while the coach provides their expertise in supporting successful change. Recovery coaching focuses on achieving any goals that are important to the individual. Helios Recovery Service is offering a digital recovery coach academy and ethics training on January the 25th to January the 30th, 2021. This training includes core competencies for recovery coaches with additional training on ethics, boundaries, medication-assisted treatment, gambling and more. Recognised as the original and leading recovery offering of its kind, the Recovery Coach Academy is a pioneering new approach to healing people's lives that is unlike any other training. Visit www.heliosrecovery.com and when you register, use the code words Life in Recovery to get 10% off the package price. Please don't forget that you can financially support the podcast if you're feeling generous. Go to www.patreon.com/Life in Recovery, and there's a few different packages to choose from there. I enjoy making the avatars for my Patreon supporters, and also if you want to dig deep, you can also appear on the podcast yourself. So check that out, patreon.com/Life in Recovery. Now, today my guest is Luke Worsfold. He is a young man who has been in recovery for about 4 or 5 years. He's got a very, very interesting story of how he was born into a life of addiction and hit rock bottom in his early 20s and has gone on to become an addiction counsellor. It's a really, really great story, and he's just a really lovely chap, and I really, really enjoyed speaking with him. So I hope you enjoy listening to this conversation as much as I enjoyed speaking with Luke.
So for me, I remember stereotypically sitting on a park bench, and it was at a local park near my house that I always used to go to kind of smoke weed and drink and stuff like that. And the reason I chose this particular bench and this particular park was because at the time I was living in a house share, and I didn't want to get kicked out of the house share that I was living in. So I used to go to the park to like use drugs and stuff like that. And at the time, I didn't have any money. I was minus £16,000 in debt, and I had a business that I'd built up that had just failed. And I had clients calling the phone asking for where the projects were and stuff like that, which I was just burying my head in the sand and kept using because their money just went on drugs, basically. And I felt a lot of shame, and I almost felt like I was just being buried. I got to the point where all of this stuff was just on top of me, and I'd exhausted all of the kind of emotional enablers around me, trying to get money off them to sort of give me drugs. And we all kind of have that list of people in our mind that we sort of call down to sort of lend us a tenner or a fiver or 50 quid, whatever it may be. And I had one last friend in my phone who I didn't want to call, who I'd been putting off to call for ages and ages. And finally, when it came down to calling this friend, I had to make the call because I didn't have anyone else to. But I knew he'd been in recovery, he ran a successful business, and I knew he would tell me the truth. And I asked him to borrow money to buy drugs, and I made up all the excuses. I was just this once, blah, 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 all the stuff that comes out of our mouth. And I remember him turning to me and going, "Luke, you're a crackhead." And at the time, I'd never smoked crack, but it just really pierced that veil of denial. I was like, wait a minute, I do actually have a problem. I realised in that moment I was an addict and I was heading towards death, and that was just a dangerous place to be. And I did consider kind of, why am I here? What's going on? I'm just heading towards death and nothing's happening. Do I really want this to be all my life? Is this what I want my life to be? But it didn't kind of start there, and I just wanted to let you know that was sort of that turning point where I hit rock bottom and I really decided not to kind of die at my worst. But for me, the journey started, I guess, with my mum. She was a drug addict as she grew up. And when she had me, she was quite heavy in her addiction. And that led me to being premature. I was born at 26 weeks. So I was a really early baby. I died 3 times when I was born, and I nearly didn't make it just because I was so giddy, and I guess I had a lot of drugs in my system from when I was being born, and breastfeeding and all that kind of stuff. So it wasn't a very habitable environment with all of the drug use from my mum. And I guess when I came out and I was born, it was just difficult. Growing up, my head was the size of like a little tennis ball, and I weighed as much as of a bag of sugar, like 1 pound. And my dad used to hold me in his hand, and his head would be here, just at the top of his hand, and my legs would be dangling down. I was just such a giddy baby. And that was just kind of where I started off at life, being born in that environment. And as I grew up, my mum's drinking, it got worse, and she kept drinking on, and she was in and out of prison, and she was in and out of rehab. And then in the end, when I got to the age of 10, she passed away, and that was really difficult because growing up with 2 older brothers and my dad, emotions weren't necessarily present in the household. If I sort of cried or showed emotions, my brothers would just kind of beat me up, and it was never kind of said or anything. It was just boys will be boys, it's okay to be angry, it's okay to have a fight, it's okay to beat each other up, but it wasn't okay to kind of cry or show emotions or learn to regulate my emotions. So I guess that's when I started to just bottle everything up, and I just hid everything down deep in the valley of my soul, never to be found again. And I was just got violent, and I guess it ties into that sort of toxic masculinity of, boys will be boys, just fight it out, just getting called names by my older brothers if I did show any emotions. And yeah, there just wasn't any room for emotions. And one story that sticks out from my childhood is once I was riding my bike and I tried to do some chip trick or something like that, and I fell off my bike and hurt my shoulder. And I called my dad and asked him to come pick me up, and he was like, "Oh, it's fine. You're not that hurt. Just ride home." And it was just, again, it wasn't said, and I'm sure he was nurturing and he cared and he was busy with his own stuff that was going on. But it just gave me the sort of subconscious message of get on with it, tough it up, boys with boys, don't show weakness, don't show emotions, just keep powering on. And that sort of message continued through school. As I went through school, and I was quite a small kid because I was premature, and that led to just being the smallest in the class, the youngest in the class, and just being bullied, the youngest of three brothers. And that was just kind of difficult as I grew up. And then, like I mentioned, my mum passed away from drinking, and my feelings just shut down. There was just nothing there. There was just this idea of, as I started being in school, getting beaten up, being bullied, and then I saw people smoking cigarettes, and I was like, oh, let's try and see what that is as we experiment in school. And I started smoking cigarettes, and I started drinking alcohol and smoking weed, and I was introduced to drugs. And I guess I never really made the connection, but there was just that sense of, I've got all of these emotions that are bottled up that I never got to express, that I'm not allowed to express. And then there's these drugs and alcohol which have been introduced, which are cool. They gave me a sense of significance and status when I was around all the other kids and I was smoking and drinking and using drugs. And I just kind of grew up. That was the foundation I was on, just building, using drugs and drinking. And that led me into sort of my early teen years when I started my first company as an entrepreneur. And I decided I was going to be this thing which I thought was an entrepreneur, whatever that meant at the time. And the more that the stress and the pressure grew from doing drugs, and I mean from running a business and doing drugs, it was that vicious cycle. The more I did drugs, and the more the pressure came, the more employees that I had, the more difficult things became to run, the more money I made, spent on drugs, living some kind of high life, being driven around in a Mercedes and doing loads of coke and drinking and just having big house parties and all that kind of stuff. But I didn't really understand, again, how to regulate my emotions. I didn't understand my emotional bank account. I only understood my financial bank account, which was just getting more and more in the negative, the more drugs I was doing and the worse everything was getting.
And what were you doing work-wise? What was the business?
Yeah, so the business I was running at the time was a web design and marketing agency. So I was doing all of the technical work and my business partner was doing the sales, and it went well. We did make money and it was good, but I guess I didn't see then what I see now after years of therapy is I didn't understand about regulating my emotions. From being an adult child of an alcoholic from my mum, I was very much a people pleaser. So I wouldn't charge people for services just because I was being nice. Which just is not very good business acumen, just to let things slide, not worry about sending invoices, and then just as much as the money was coming in, I was just spending it faster on drugs and rent and all that kind of stuff. And it was just a difficult place to be, that kind of snowball of just going round and round. The more money I made, the more I spent, and it just got to the point where it all just imploded. The money ran out. I was doing loads of drugs and I was just like, this is enough, the business has to close. So I closed the business and moved into the house share. And then fast forward 6 months of doing drugs every day and ignoring clients' phone calls. And that's where we got to the park bench where I was sitting there and I called my friend and I was just heading towards death just like my mum, because he woke me up to that fact. He's like, you're a crackhead. And I was like, I'm just the same as my mum. I never wanted to become like her. I never wanted to be a drug addict. I never wanted to be an alcoholic. but I turned around and looked, and that's exactly who I saw in the mirror. And I just realised, do I want to die just like her? And I guess in that moment, I sort of discovered that her death wasn't the example. Her life, her life wasn't the example. Her death was the lesson that we should, change and grow. And that's what I needed to do. And I went on a journey over many years in my recovery to then change and grow from there.
So how old were you when you hit that rock bottom on the park bench then?
I must have been about 21, 22, around that kind of age. About 20, 21, 22. So it was about 4 or 5 years ago from now.
Okay. I was going to say you only look about 21, 22 now.
Yeah, no, exactly. I've always looked young. One day that'll be on my side. And
Yeah, it will. Well, I've just turned 40, so when you get to my age, that's when it's on your side, definitely.
Yeah.
So it's been about 4 or 5 years of recovery, has it? Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's the journey of recovery been then? So from that point on the park bench, what happened then?
Yeah. So I didn't do anything massively spectacular. I just Googled therapist and just booked one in that was close to me. I just realised I watched a lot of mentors and stuff on YouTube, and I watched a lot of, all the famous motivational videos and all that kind of stuff. You're born to be amazing, all of that kind of stuff, which is a bit gimmicky, but in a sense is true. And I just kind of went to therapy, and I didn't know what therapy was. I didn't really know what it was like opening the sort of emotional lid on everything that I just suppressed for so many years. So walking into that first therapy session, I really thought I would die or spontaneously combust, or I didn't know what was happening. I was just going to explode. The universe would stop. I just didn't know. And that uncertainty and that anxiety was scary, but I just thought it can't go on. So I went to therapy, and over the weeks and months of just keep going back and untangling that mess of my emotions, I slowly learned, what my feelings were, that it was okay to have emotions, and what that meant, and how I was being a people pleaser, and how to set boundaries, and how to just process the grief from my mum dying and my brothers and my childhood. And along the same kind of line, I went to Al-Anon meetings as well. And I think looking back, I chose Al-Anon rather than NA or CA or AA, just because I thought it was a bit easier, just to focus on my mum rather than me. And I just went to Al-Anon meetings, but it was a similar kind of thing, thinking about the steps and all that kind of stuff, and I enjoyed that. And then I did start going to NA meetings after a while, so it was good to kind of get my foot in the door with the Al-Anon meetings, which was really good. And I also read loads of books in personal development about psychology. And over the next many years, I just started to slowly stop doing drugs. It wasn't an overnight process. It was like a slow process over like a year of trying to stop drinking, stop smoking weed, stop doing coke. And then slowly the time went on, and I would just keep going back to therapy. And I guess that was one thing that was consistent that really helped, was therapy, was being able to keep going back and just having that consistency. Whether I relapsed, whether I didn't, I just kept going back to meetings, kept going back to therapy, and that really helped, just to always have that there and keep going.
So are you an active member of NA now still, or is that something that you did?
I'm not a member of NA now. I still go to some meetings.
Yeah.
But I've actually been going to adult children of alcoholics, which I'm finding really interesting at my stage of recovery at the moment. Just looking at what is the impact of my mum's sort of actions on me, how it is to be a child, an adult child of an alcoholic. And I've been working a lot on that balance between my inner child and my kind of adult, which has been where I'm at now. But certainly in the past, going through like doing loads of NA meetings was really helpful. Being in the rooms and going to those different meetings, I really found valuable, as well as therapy was always that kind of consistent place for me to sort of do the work. I think meetings were really good, and I really enjoyed sharing and doing the shares. But for me personally, to really get that therapeutic growth, I really needed to go to therapy, which was where that journey kind of took me.
Yeah, that's interesting because a lot of people say it's the other way around a lot of the time. So it's nice to hear somebody, because I mean, the point of this podcast, and one of the things that I say repeatedly is whatever works for the individual, and it's nice to hear different perspectives and different ways that people have recovered, because a lot of the time you'll hear, I've heard people kind of tell the stories and they'll say I went to therapy for a little bit and then I joined a 12-step fellowship and, I've stuck with that, or, loads of different types of stories. But that's interesting that the therapy has been the thing that has been the kind of staple throughout your recovery. So you talked about, taking the lid off and dealing with your emotions. And I noticed on your LinkedIn page that you talks about the emotional bank. So what do you do some work around recovery now then? Is that the line of work that you're in, and how's that kind of manifested into what you do now?
Yeah, so I guess does the emotional bank manager come in? So I heard about that phrase on one of these talks, and I didn't want to refer to my therapist as a therapist or as someone I took my emotions to at the very beginning. I just wasn't comfortable even having emotions. I used to say to my business partner, if you want a friend, get a dog. I'm a ruthless businessman. I don't have emotions. I'm not an emotional person. I just get on with stuff, and I just didn't believe I had any emotions or that it was good to have emotions. So I started to call my therapist my emotional bank manager, because I thought, okay, it's acceptable in my logical, non-emotional brain to understand we have a financial bank account and emotional bank account. So I'm just going to go and see my emotional bank manager. I pay attention to my finances and what money comes in and out. So it's important to pay attention to my emotions that come in and out and review those and look over everything. And I just found that a good way for me to keep going back. Still saved in my calendar now to this day as emotional bank manager, which is always good fun. But it's interesting, and I always just found that an easy way just to kind of frame it in my mind to help me go and help me get over that initial barrier. But along my journey, how did I get from where I was then to today? By going through therapy, I certainly picked up a lot of healthy habits that built a solid mental foundation. So I did a lot of exercise every single day. I go to the gym. I also meditated a lot, and I still do to this day, but meditation is a big thing for me. Also peer groups, so changing the people that I spent time with was a massive shift in my recovery, thinking about the people I was hanging around with, who was I spending the most time with. And I guess over many years, I went to therapy and I learned 4 main areas of my life that I sort of fixed, which was the mind, my thinking. Why do I keep relapsing? Why do I keep picking up drugs? Why do I keep having these thoughts? And I just didn't understand. And then the next area was kind of my relationships. What's happening with my relationships? How do I relate to other people? Why am I a people pleaser? Why do I put other people's needs above mine? How can't I set boundaries? Why can't I communicate? All of these questions that I learned to answer in therapy. And then it was kind of those times when shit hits the fan, you get a punch in the face from life, things were going really well, and I'd get a bill come up or a client call me that I didn't realise was even existed, and it would just make me relapse because I didn't understand how to deal with that emotional distress. And then lastly, it was actually regulating my emotions. Why did I even have emotions? What did that even mean? And those 4 main areas, excuse me, are what I take clients through today. Because as I was going through my own therapy, I learned the value of it, and I was like, wow, my therapist is really good. They really changed my life. And then I went on to do my degree in therapy and became a counsellor, which is something I didn't believe I would do, but it was just interesting, and I just thought this is definitely something I want to do, is to be able to help people how I've been helped. So I went and got my degree, and along that journey I discovered something called dialectical behavioural therapy, and that went over these exact 4 modules of mindfulness, of mindfulness, of interpersonal effectiveness and relationships, of distress tolerance, how to deal with those emotionally intense situations, and emotional regulation. And I just thought I wish I had this when I started. I wish I had a program that existed that allowed me to sort of condense all these years into a matter of weeks to learn this stuff and to be taken through it in a therapeutic and structured way. And that's what I do with clients now, is I take them through a 12-week program that goes through these 4 modules that allows them to be able to not only learn the psychoeducational information, but also have the emotional space to look at some of the past and change what's going on. And now that's what I do on a daily basis, is work with clients, taking them through that process.
Cool. That's a nice transformation, isn't it? Definitely.
Yeah.
It's quite incredible, really, that you had that thought around the things that you wanted to change before you even got into the dialectic. Is it dialectical behaviour therapy? It's called. Is that? Yeah, I've heard of it before. I've never really looked into it, but yeah, it sounds very interesting. Yeah, it's key, isn't it? I think, just listening to you, you sound like you said like you've got a logical brain. You sound like quite an analytical person. And I think that this is where it's very interesting around, like, I've been in 12-step recovery for over 10 years. And initially when I first joined the fellowships, I was like, obviously it blew my mind, I did the steps and changed, and but the whole experience was just so radical that I was like, everybody should be doing this, and I just wanted to shout it from the rooftops. And initially, and probably for a first, I don't know, probably 2 or 3 years, I never even considered that there was any other way for people to recover. I just thought that there was either that or you just died, or you just stayed drinking and using. And then I started working in a prison, I did the similar thing to you. I trained as a counsellor, and I was working in prison as a drug and alcohol counsellor. And I started coming across all these different people and all these different ways of, of therapy and different programs like the SMART recovery and all that kind of stuff, and all the different types of counselling. And it really expanded my horizons and opened my mind. And what I found was that, it's about fitting your personality to the different type of therapy. And, a lot of people walk into 12-step fellowships and walk straight out and never come back because it just doesn't work for them for whatever reason. But finding something that works, it's really, really key. And it sounds like you were very intent on understanding yourself and understanding what was making you tick. Well, question I did want to ask you though was, what about the rest of your family? Like, how have they taken your recovery? And because when you mentioned a punch in the face, I thought now's a good time to mention your brothers. So how have they taken your recovery, and what's their story? Are they users, or how's that panned out?
Yeah. So in terms of the rest of my family, I have 2 sisters who are my stepsisters from my stepmom. And then I have my 2 brothers who are my biological brothers, but we've all been a family since we were quite young. So that's been, they're just my sisters and brothers. But there's that sense of when my mum just passed away, a bit before that, my dad met my stepmom. So there was this overlap between my mum just passed away when I was around 10 and I met my stepmom. And it was really difficult for me to kind of manage that process as a 10-year-old kid. I wanted my mum's love. I didn't really understand addiction. I didn't understand what that meant. And then there was this woman in my life who was amazing, but I just didn't really see that at the time. I didn't understand what was going on, and I couldn't really connect with that. And that was difficult for me. And only in hindsight and lots and lots of therapy have I really started to learn that I didn't lose one mum, but I was blessed enough to be given 2. And I've really worked a lot on the relationship with my stepmom, but especially as a teenager growing up, things were definitely difficult. I remember one of the first times my stepmom came round, my brother ran out of the house, and then a second later I ran out chasing him with a cricket bat. And she kind of came into our lives. She had 2 girls who were quite girly at the time, and my dad had 3 boys who just lost their mum, who were just a bit rough around the edges and a bit street. So that was definitely a collision of different cultures and family dynamics. But I think in the end, looking back, as we've all grown up, over the past, how many, 15, 16 years. It's been a really good blend, and I think we've both balanced each other out, which is really good. But yeah, the rest of my family, they're cool. I'm, reasonably close to them now. They all live locally. In terms of addiction, none of my brothers are, if you like, kind of addicts, or have really gone in really bad ways. But one, I don't want to talk about them too much because that's for them to say. But my brother in particular, one that I'm close to, the middle one, he actually smoked weed a lot with me. And I've done drugs with my older brothers just because they're older and that's just the way it works. But with the middle brother, we smoked a lot of weed together, and he actually stopped smoking weed first. And when I kind of learned that was another big shift in my recovery. I was like, wait a minute, what just happened? He'd stopped smoking weed, and I was like, how did this even happen? I never imagined that, and that kind of opened my eyes a bit to, wait a minute, that's possible. So that was definitely enlightening. But yeah, the rest of my family are good, and I think the relationship with my stepmom has come leaps and bounds. I remember recently, or a few years ago, was the first time I brought her a Mother's Day card in 15 years, and that was just amazing. She, of course, broke down in tears, and it was really emotional. And I really that was just a big breakthrough when I was like, you are my mum, and I finally kind of accepted her love and everything that she had given, that was there all along, but there was just that mental barrier. You're not my mum. I wanted the love for my mum who passed away, and that's a difficult therapeutic thing to overcome. But that was a really grateful day that happened recently, and that's kind of the family as an overview.
So I'd like to just take a couple of minutes to introduce you to my new sponsor, Bud's Life CBD patches. Now, Bud's Life CBD patches are completely legal in the UK. They don't contain any of the THC or have any psychoactive effects of cannabis. So these have got no psychoactive properties at all, which means that they're not a drug. They're actually a supplement. So these CBD patches take all the goodness that cannabis has to offer, but you don't have to worry about getting high. And they're just a fantastic way of managing anxiety or pain without any of the psychoactive effects. So if other methods of CBD supplementation haven't worked for you, then buying CBD patches in the US or the UK could be the best alternative. Go to www.budslife.co.uk, or you can check them out at instagram.com/budslifecbduk or facebook.com/budslifecbduk. And they are available in 16 milligrams, 32 milligrams and 50 milligram patches. And if you'd like to get 15% off your first order, just use the promo code Life in Recovery. So that's 15% off your first order. Just use the promo code Life in Recovery. Yeah, I got quite emotional then when you just said that about your mum. It really kind of hit me, that did. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing that you've got that relationship now. Just miraculous, really. It's miraculous. When you think about your story overall, I mean, you had no chance really. Like being born to the parent to somebody who was right in the middle of their addiction. I mean, essentially you were kind of born withdrawing, weren't you, by the sounds of it? But to get from there to where you are now, where you're counselling people for their addictions, it's just absolutely incredible. What is this business that you're running now? When did you start that? How long have you been doing that?
Yeah, so I've been doing that the past 2 years as I sort of came through and was doing my. I always wanted to run my own business. I've always been an entrepreneur. But when I was doing my degree, the business that failed, that there were some scraps and pieces lying around, I actually gave to a friend, so I didn't have any business at the time. And I was working in mental health. So I was working with clients who had learning difficulties and mental health problems, which I really enjoyed. And that was good while I was doing my degree. But I always knew one day I'd go into private practice and I'd run my own company. I was just kind of doing my degree at the same time. And then as my degree sort of was coming to an end and I was qualified enough to be able to start seeing clients, I then started the business I run now and did my extra training in DBT therapy and all that fun stuff. So it's been running for a few years, and I really enjoy it. It's definitely aligned with who I am, being in the right place. It's been interesting through COVID as well. That's been a whole big thing as well this whole year. But that's been just seeing clients online, just how we're seeing each other now, which has been good. I also worked in a few different rehabs as well, which I really enjoyed along the way. I like rehab, having worked there. I never attended rehab myself, but having worked in different rehabs, I like the idea of rehab. I think is good. But yeah, that's where I'm at the moment, just running the program and running my own business.
Yeah, to completely remove people from society and give them that like space to to begin recovering is very, very important. I think like some people, there's absolutely no chance they could do it without that respite. So yeah, I agree with that. Where did you study then? Where did you do your degree?
So I did my degree just locally, where I had the job at the time, just working locally. I just did the degree locally as well. Just in
Essex or London?
Yeah, in Essex. So it's just outside London,
Yeah.
about an hour away on the train, 40 minutes on the train. So I did it locally, just around there. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was a few days a week. It was definitely challenging, but I think a lot of my beliefs are overcome. One belief I'll never forget was in therapy, I said to my therapist, I'll never stop smoking weed. I don't know what you're talking about. You're wrong. Which is just interesting. And now being a therapist, I find it even more amusing, seeing all the different sides. But I think at the time when I was going through my own addiction, that really helped me with my relationship to my mum, gather that sense of understanding, gathering that sense of what it's like to be an addict. I guess understanding it wasn't about me, because there's always those big questions. Oh, if mum had really loved me, she wouldn't have drunk and killed herself. If I loved her more, she wouldn't have drunk and killed herself. And you just live with those kind of big questions. What if? What if? But going through my own addiction and being in the rooms and being a counsellor, I really understand. It's not about me. She was on her own journey, doing her own stuff with her own demons. And yeah, that was her process and her path in life. And yeah, I guess, like I said before, I recognise that her life isn't an example. Her death was the lesson. But in terms of my degree, I did that locally, and I didn't believe I would ever kind of do a degree or that I would even make it. But that was, I guess, just part of the journey and something I also use therapy for. And I guess I beat the belief of not smoking weed, not doing drugs, and I was sober. So I was like, I can do this. It may be hard, and it was definitely challenging. I'm not very academic. I'm quite creative, but it was, I really enjoyed it, and I wouldn't change it for the world. It was definitely something. I grew as a person, and I think that's the thing I enjoyed the most. Wasn't necessarily the idea of having a piece of paper signed by someone I've never met telling me I can help people. It was just this idea of who am I going to become in the process, and as that person, who will I be able to help? And that's what I really enjoyed, is really upgrading myself, learning a lot, being challenged, doing all the practical work, doing all of the case studies and the placement, all that kind of stuff. And really growing who I am, so I had more to give from my overflow and being able to help people who came through a similar path. So I think my degree was just an amazing part of the journey.
And what would you say that life in recovery means to you then?
Life in recovery, I think I guess it just means that sense of, just what you really want when you use drugs, in a sense. Because when you use drugs, you want the distress to go away. You don't want You want to be able to manage your emotions. You want just life to be easy. But I felt like, I'll speak for myself, when I was in addiction, I just wanted everything to be easy. I wanted success. I wanted to be a successful entrepreneur. I just wanted everything to be fixed. And I just didn't know how to make everything work. So then I used drugs and just had those really high peaks and those really low troughs. And that was really difficult, just bouncing up and down. So what recovery means to me now is just learning that, happiness is a byproduct of thinking happy thoughts. I don't think the goal of life should be happiness. We can be happy and get pleasure from doing loads of things like drugs and sex and all those different pleasurable activities. But real fulfillment is what I feel like we should aim for. And that sense of fulfillment is what I've got in recovery, that ability to be able to manage my emotions. And it doesn't mean I'm happy every day. It doesn't mean that life is easy. It doesn't mean that everything's a breeze. I can't control everything. I don't know there's going to be a global pandemic that may affect my life. There's stuff outside my control. But it's about having the ability to manage and weather the storms of life and be able to have the certainty that, I'll be okay. That sort of faith and that, belief that I'm going in the right direction. I'm aligned. I have my needs aligned, so my growth and contribution and my top driving needs. I'm able to focus on where I'm going and giving back to other people, and that brings me a lot of fulfillment. And I would never have that in addiction. In addiction, it was just all about me and all about my journey, what I was doing, just when I could get the next hit, when I could get the next drug. It was completely self-centered. Whereas now I feel like it's very sort of ethnocentric rather than egocentric, and I'm a lot more aligned and focused on giving back and that value, which I really just find is fulfilling.
Yeah, it's peace of mind, isn't it, that you get from this stuff? Like, that's where the happiness arises from, is from a peaceful mind, at least in my experience. You mentioned faith then, and also mentioned that you're really into meditation, and I relate to that. I'm massively into meditation and I've been for many years. What's your kind of spiritual leanings, if you have any?
Yeah, so in terms of meditation, I love meditation. I think that was a big click for me. A lot of books I read, The Power of Now, Wherever You Go, There You Are by John Kabat-Zinn. A lot of those books really allowed me to understand I am not my thoughts. I'm a person and I have thoughts. And if I think about using a drug or drinking or any kind of behaviour, a thought does not equal an action or decision. Just because I think I need to do a line of coke doesn't mean that has to be my reality 10 seconds later. It can just be a thought, and that's completely okay. So I think meditation has always guided a lot of my change, a lot of my managing my mental state. And in terms of how I specifically meditate, I like the apps. I like Headspace. I like Sam Harris's app, Waking Up. I like guided meditations. I like ones where I can learn something new. Like Headspace has a lot of courses, which I really enjoy, because it's like, cool, we're learning stuff. There's a progress every day, which I enjoy. And that's generally where meditation fits in, and it just kind of slows everything down, calms everything down, allows me to be more, just sort of methodical and less reactive to life, and having the ability to just kind of step back, understand what's going on, not acting based on my feelings, but acting based on my facts. And that's something I always say to clients: is it a fact or is it a feeling? And oftentimes we do things based on feelings, not based on facts. And it's that kind of balance between the reasonable mind, the emotional mind, and that kind of wise mind, and acting in that wise mind that's important. And mindfulness definitely gives you the balance to be able to take that step back and have that perspective. But in terms of faith and spirituality, I don't believe in any particular, religion as such. I do enjoy parts of Buddhism, if I had to kind of choose one. In terms of faith, I do believe in, a power bigger than myself, in a sense. If you have 7 billion people in the world, and we can only control 20% of our brain, which is our conscious mind, we have 7 billion people with 70% of their brain that's doing stuff they don't know. That creates a certain amount of shift of different things that happen that are outside of our control. And I guess it's having the faith that, we're guided in some kind of direction, we're going in the right way. And I always think of it in terms of A river, if you think about a river, you're stuck in the current. Oftentimes we try and swim against the current, or when we get to a bend in the river that's going right, we're like, no, I don't want to go over there, I'm going to go straight. So we get our boat and we kind of drag it across the bank, and then we put it back in the river because we're like, we're going this way and we're going to force everything to happen. But really, if we could just take a bird's eye view and realise, oh, wait a minute, that left turn, if we took that little detour, it would end up exactly where we want, and we could kind of connect those dots, it would just make sense. So for me, it's about being at the ground level in the river's bending right, and just having faith. Okay, I understand the river's going to come back round. It may not be where I want to go, but I know it's going in the right direction. And that happened so many times in my past, even sitting on the park bench with my friend. I didn't know what therapy would happen if I went into therapy. I didn't know I'd be where I was today. That felt like a waterfall at the time. But I've ended up where I am. And all of those little shifts looking back, it's easy to connect the dots. And of course, I can't see into the future. But for me, it's just faith is about understanding that things will work out, and not from just some kind of wishful thinking. It's not like, just sitting there praying, no weeds, no weeds, no weeds, and then looking and loads of weeds show up, or thinking, money in my bank, and then, wondering why I just get bills for the letterbox. It's not about wishful thinking. It still requires action. One of my favourite mentors said, you can't meditate your way out of a tiger attack. And that's something I really enjoy, because it's about the metaphysical and physical in one. You still have to take action. You still have to guide the boat in the river, but it's just not about swimming against the current. It's about going with life and guiding yourself and allowing yourself to have that faith, understand that you're going in the right direction, even if you can't see it, and just trusting in the process.
Yeah, it's very much at the moment, it's very apparent, obviously, because of the COVID situation and the way it's been for the last 9 months, 10 months, however long it's been, that people don't do that. They don't go with the flow. And it's very apparent that, the vast majority of people kind of like live from this place of fear. I think that, your experience sounds very similar to mine, that as a result of doing the work, and the action word, awareness, acceptance, action are like the 3 A's that I always live by, and the action part of it is key. Living in that place of faith means that you don't need to really worry about what's going on around you. Just keep on moving, keep plodding along, keep putting the work in. Don't pay too much attention to the negativity, and like you say, things kind of work out, don't they?
Yeah, and having the faith and confidence in yourself that you know what you're doing, even if you can't see the right direction, know that you're kind of going in it and taking those actions, and being guided by all of, like you say, the work. It is important to do the work, and that's important, but sometimes it's still difficult. Even recently, my girlfriend, before COVID happened, she was saying, why don't you see more clients online? Why don't you see them via Skype? Because I was travelling a lot to London and Southend and to a rehab and all this stuff all over the place. And it was just a lot to be travelling for like hours every day. And she was saying, why don't you see more clients online? And I was like, no. Again, with my limiting beliefs, that won't work. I need to see clients face to face as well. That's not going to happen. I have to be face to face. And then COVID happened and I couldn't go into the rehab. I couldn't go out of the house. So I was like, okay, all my clients are now online. And it was not a problem at all. Everyone just moved online. And it's like, oh, come on, Luke, if you'd have just had that faith, then you wouldn't have kind of been with it. But it's about taking the action in the moment, waking up and going, okay, all my clients can go online. And I guess recognizing when life does knock, opening the door and being able to, I didn't just sit there and go, okay, I won't see anyone and I'm just going to sit in my house and not do anything. I was like, okay, cool, we're going to get online. All my clients will be online. I'll just run an online practice. Everything will work. And what have we got to do to happen? So I'm still making those leaps. But it's just an interesting perspective of sometimes our beliefs, we need life to knock on the door to kind of wake us up a bit. And COVID definitely helped with that. And it's been amazing for me to see all my clients online. And it's actually built my practice because I can see someone in Manchester and someone in London 1 hour after the other, but that just wasn't possible if I saw them face to face. So it's been really interesting and just good growth. And it's about, two people sat behind prison bars, one saw mud, the other saw stars. It's just that old saying, where are you choosing to look? Are you choosing to look at the positive and focusing your attention on what's happening, or are you focusing on the negative and on that fear, like we said?
I'm sure that your background in kind of marketing has really helped as well, with being able to market and promote yourself and stuff and get yourself up there on the search engines.
Yeah, no, that has definitely helped. Having that kind of secret skill has been good. But I didn't build my own website, which is a crime, for ages. I just left it with like some one basic page. And it wasn't until lockdown I was like, right, I'm stuck indoors, I'm not going anywhere. I was like, Luke, build your website, please. Just build a really good website. You've got the ability, just get it done. And that's been a really awesome journey just to do that as well. But having those skills definitely helps.
Yeah.
Also, learning to communicate, being able to talk to clients in a way that helps them connect with therapy and understand what it is, and helps them beat their limiting beliefs so they can get the help that really does work.
What's your advice then for anybody out there that's struggling, that's, that may be thinking about making a change, or they're just kind of like, they've reached a place where like enough is enough, not just necessarily with addiction, just in general, they want to make a change? What would you suggest?
Yeah, so in order to start off, one of the things that I created for people was a little ebook that includes 7 foundational tools that people can use to learn and start off to change those healthy habits. And they can download that at insideaddiction.co.uk/foundation. But those tools are things like exercise and mindfulness and how to upgrade your peer group, those basic things that really help you and get you thinking about that kind of psychoeducational information. I'd also recommend counselling, not just because I'm a counsellor, but just finding a counsellor that works for you and an approach that works for you, just to try those different things. I think meetings are good. If you've never been to a meeting, 100% go, especially now you can do them online. People have no excuse, and they're 24 hours, so you've got even less excuses. But it's about just taking that action and being able just to listen in, connect with people, because I think meetings are amazing because you're like, wow, there's more people who are like me, and I think that can't be beaten. Just that understanding, everyone, I'll speak from I felt that everyone around me was either an addict not wanting to get help, or they were a family member or someone else nagging me to get help, and I just thought, they don't understand, they don't get what I'm going through, they're not me in a sense. So it's difficult to be in that isolating place, and I felt like going to a meeting really helped me understand, okay, I'm not alone, there are other people like me, I do connect to these stories. This is a problem that can be solved. It's not unique to me. I'm not special and different. I can change and grow this problem and this sort of behaviour. People have got through this before. It's not just, it is possible. So I'd recommend people go to meetings, find a counsellor or approach that works for them. They can start meditating, start doing some exercise, and just focusing on those positive habits and really starting to change their behaviour and move in the right direction. And I think one thing that a lot of people miss in recovery is not creating a vision. A lot of people that I meet in the rooms and different places like that, sometimes their goal can be just to get sober, which I think is an amazing goal, but I think oftentimes we need a vision bigger than that. If you think about people who run the marathon, for example, the London Marathon, if their goal is just to get to the finish line, I don't have the numbers, but their rate of finishing will go way down. It's not enough just to get to the finish line. But if they're running for a charity and they've raised £1,000, £2,000 for cancer because they lost their relative to cancer, when it really gets hard, they're going to be like, I'm not giving up. I'm raising this money. I'm doing it for a cause bigger than myself. I'm doing it for my relative. I'm doing it for all the people in the world with cancer. It's bigger than me. And that really helps you kind of dig in and get past the finish line when times get hard. So I think if people really think of that vision that's kind of bigger than them, that their life that they can really achieve, and look at those role models, look at those people out there in the world that have really achieved success, whether that's Eminem or Oprah Winfrey or whoever it may be. Really look at those kind of stories and understand it is possible to get from A to B. It's not a miracle. I'm not special and different. This can change and this can grow. And again, coming back to that faith, although it may seem like there's only waterfalls in front of me, having faith that one of those waterfalls is going to lead in the right direction, that belief that it is possible to change, and building that sense of certainty is important.
Yeah, you find that anybody that's majorly successful has got those two ingredients. They've got faith and they've got a really good work ethic. I mean, nothing comes easily to anybody, does it? I mean, one of my favourite sayings is it takes 10 years to become an overnight success.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure speaking with you, mate. I've actually got, I've related more to you listening to you than anybody for a long time. We've got very, very similar perspective on the world of recovery and just life in general by the sounds of it. And interesting that we've gone down separate routes, but we have, the amount of stuff that you've talked about that's aligned with the way that I've gone as well, because aside from the 12-step program, I've done loads of research and, reading and investigating into all sorts of different spiritual paths and psychologies, and I've written books myself, and it's just been an amazing journey so far. So yeah, it's been really great speaking with you. Where can people find you online?
Yeah, so they can just go to insideaddiction.co.uk. They can check out all our recovery programs, my podcast as well. They can have a look at that. Awesome if they like podcast and addiction, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, they can just head over there. Everything's on the website. They can find out more about me and the work I do, and they can get some free support as well wherever they're at in their journey. If they need anything, they can just let me know.
Brilliant, mate. Well, I'll put links underneath the show notes to your website. And thanks very much for joining us on the Life in Recovery podcast. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, Luke.
No, yeah, thanks very much. It's been awesome. Thanks for having me on.
Cheers, mate. Take care. Thanks for listening, and if you've been affected by any of the issues discussed in the podcast, please see a range of mutual aid organisations in the show notes. Also, don't forget that you can support the Life in Recovery podcast by visiting patreon.com/lifeinrecovery, and the podcast is sponsored by Dennis Berry Life Coaching. Go to www.dennisberry.com for your free consultation and use the code words Life in Recovery to get 10% off your next 3 sessions. Also, go to www.sugaraddiction.com/lifeinrecovery and download your free copy of the Last Resort Sugar Detox Guide. And if you're really serious about quitting sugar, check out his 30-day Sugar Freedom Challenge whilst you are there. The podcast is also sponsored by Helios Recovery Services, the Recovery Coach Training Academy. Visit www.heliosrecovery.com to register for the Digital Recovery Coach Academy and Ethics Training, which is on January the 25th to January the 30th, 2021. And when you register, use the code words Life in Recovery to get 10% off the package price. And don't forget, you can get 15% off CBD patches to help you with stress and anxiety if you go to budslife.co.uk and use the promo code Life in Recovery. Peace and love, and goodbye for now.